That means we lose less money. When I see that, that means we lose less money.
Alberta separation is spooking the Liberals. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we have new data coming out. New data always follows the money. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of this data coming out, but we've got Angus Reid coming out with a new study on not only the potential of Alberta, but also Saskatchewan separating from Canada. We've got more attacks on the Conservatives. Mark Carney soon to be announcing his new cabinet. More wasteful spending from the Liberals and a bunch of other stuff. Let's jump into this. Normally I start these episodes with the polling data, but because there's so much of it to go through, we're going to get through some housekeeping first. We've got Delta Korea Air buy 25% stake in Canadian carrier WestJet for $550 million. This is interesting because we already saw Rogers just a few weeks ago have 49.9% bought up by Blackstone, American company, and now we're seeing Delta and Korea Air buying up WestJet. What is going on in Canada? We also got NDP talking to Mark Carney's government about getting official party status. So this is their bargaining chip. Either Carney's going to flip some of these NDP members over to the Liberals, or this is going to be their concession, which means the NDP gets nothing out of agreement with them aside from official party status. So which would lead me to believe once they get a leader, they would want to have an election to get more of their seats back. Hopefully that means we get another election in the next year and a half. We also got this one, Mark Carney to unveil his new cabinet at Rideau Hall on Tuesday. One of the key things to look at is Sean Fraser was brought back. He had Nate Erskine-Smith take over the housing portfolio from Sean Fraser. So I wonder if he's going to get shuffled back in there. There's also some new faces. So what will Mark Carney do? He still hasn't announced his deputy. Francois Philippe Champagne was the finance minister, which is funny because technically the guy most qualified for finance minister is this guy, corrupt finance minister. I don't see that position changing from Francois, and I expect he'll be announced as the deputy, but who knows? We'll see. We got the April jobs report coming out, and it's just absolutely devastating.
It's April's job numbers. It says the economy added 7,400 jobs, but that wasn't enough to keep that unemployment rate from rising for the second straight month. It's now at 6.9%. The increase in the jobless rate suggests employers aren't hiring as quickly as the population grows. Canada's manufacturing sector shed 31,000 jobs as tariffs from the United States hampered the industry. Offsetting that loss was a jump in temporary employment connected to last month's federal election.
The older Liberals voted for more of this. They just don't care about Canada. They'll hire more public service employees again. That's the only number's been propping up our jobs. Yeah, it's true. What a disaster. These Liberals ain't going to do nothing. We got CTV on the attack again. They've brought on Aaron O'Toole. They dug him out of the closet. Poilievre didn't adapt enough to Trump or Trudeau's shakeups. Need to make peace with premiers. O'Toole's got to be one of the worst conservative leaders in Canadian history. O'Toole here saying they got used to having strong polling numbers. He goes on to say he thinks his successor has to learn some of these lessons. When it comes down to it, this whole situation with Trump, nobody could predict it, and it was like a coin toss to know what to do with the situation. Next up, I'm seeing this one being passed around a lot on Twitter. This is $33 billion of new spending put through. This is a warrant to keep the government in function because, well, they haven't been in Parliament doing anything. It's been basically 8 months since the government has done anything, even though they're getting paid a minimum of around $200,000 a year. Most notably out of all these, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, getting another $178 million. Here's all the other spending. This is just to keep the government going, basically. Got this one here. It says it's been revealed that under Trudeau and the Liberal government, they have spent $11 billion on overseas gender programs. This is right out of my Far Off Ripoff segment. I've shown dozens of these at this point. Those will be coming back as well. Imagine what we could have done with $11 billion for Canadians. This is a waste of taxpayer money. There are so many ways to transform our country with $11 billion, and giving them over to money laundering schemes in Africa is not one of those. Next up, the new jobs report in Canada is terrible. Franco Terrazzano here with the numbers.
Well, StatsCan just released another jobs report, and it shows the tale of a ballooning bureaucracy and a struggling private sector. Okay, so in the last month alone, the number of government bureaucrats added were about 23,000. Okay, 23,000 government bureaucrats added in the last month, whereas private sector jobs went down about 27,000. Okay, so almost 23,000 more government bureaucrat jobs across Canada, while the private sector shed almost 27,000 jobs. But look,
those numbers are absolutely awful. It's such a bad record. Yet who voted for this? The people who don't need jobs, the retired Liberal voters.
Of the government bureaucracy ballooning while the private sector stalls goes much further than just last month. If you go back to pre-pandemic levels, okay, since pre-pandemic, the number of government bureaucrats has gone up 20%. The private sector, only 6%.
Are we surprised? The Liberals keep propping up their numbers with more government jobs so it doesn't look bad. As someone says here, this means the government would have to fire its voting base, which would never happen. And it's a valid point. Carney has no plan, is not capable of solving basic business problems. Another PR junkie like Trudeau. Boomers will survive this, but future generations will suffer. There it is. That comment sums up the whole situation. Moving over to Angus Reid Institute. This is the new poll that just came out. First off, it says, would you vote for your province to leave Canada or to stay? This gray color is Alberta. This green color is Saskatchewan. Half of the people in both provinces don't want to go. But if you add up these two, which is definitely would leave and leaning towards wanting to leave, this puts it at 36% of Albertans want to leave and 34% of people from Saskatchewan want to leave. Furthermore, they have, if the federal government committed to building Energy East, the energy pipeline across Canada. Now this changes. You have these blue bars spiking here, more likely to want to stay, 65%, 38% in Alberta, and 31 versus 69% in Saskatchewan. So it comes down to prosperity in Canada. And I said this in the last video, if they just got rid of all those things that are hindering Canada, then Canadians wouldn't want to leave, wouldn't want to separate. This data backs that up. Furthermore, it goes down, has key findings. These are basically coming from Danielle Smith. What would make leavers more likely want to stay? Energy East pipeline, removal of the emissions cap, repealing C-69, Indigenous protests would not sway the leavers. Opposition to Tidewater access, Quebec opposition to pipelines. This is also interesting data here. This shows how many people are aware of the separation talk. In Alberta, you add these two together. This is a lot of reading. This is a fair amount. Together, that's 78% of people are aware of this separation talk in Alberta. Saskatchewan, not as much because, well, Saskatchewan isn't the headline in all the news with this. Still 58% of people, though. This next chart shows who would be in favor of holding a referendum. The UPC party versus the NDP. You can see, obviously, NDP supporters don't want to leave or don't want to separate. UPC supporters in favor. And here's total of Alberta. 41% of people don't want to go. 38% of people want to separate. This one here says, suppose the Conservatives had won the federal election in April. Would this change your feeling on wanting to leave Canada? Yes, this would change my feeling here. 72% in Alberta, 78% in Saskatchewan. This is just it. The Conservatives should have won that election. Liberals ran a dirty campaign, whether it's with the buttons or all the crap that's on Facebook. Fear-mongering with Donald Trump. There's nothing honorable about what they did. They used dirty tactics and they got away with another win. This one here talks about if they remove the emissions cap on oil and gas, and these blue ones here are people more wanting to stay. It just comes down to prosperity in Canada, and if the government is going to hinder prosperity and hurt people's livelihoods and people's ability to live a good life, then people don't want to be in this country. Got this one here, shows the approval rating of Scott Moe in the green and Danielle Smith in the blue, 52 versus 47. People that should be included in the talks about separation. Danielle Smith at the top here, 54%, versus all the rest of them here in Alberta. This one includes Scott Moe as well, and he's at 51 versus 49% for Danielle Smith. Percentage of people who are important voice in these discussions. This pie chart here shows, do you believe Danielle Smith wants Alberta to separate, or do you believe she's using it to gain leverage with the federal government? So 26% of people think she wants to separate. 47% people say leverage, and that's what this is. Danielle Smith is smart. She's trying to get leverage against the government because the government is awful to Alberta and the West. This one asks if she should be in charge of the separation or if it should be someone else, and it's split basically down the middle. So a lot of interesting data here. When it comes down to it, Canadians just want to feel heard. They want to have prosperity. Canadians want a good life. The Liberal government has been hindering that for a decade. Unfortunately, since we have a lot of older voters and they're not working, so prosperity doesn't really matter that much. The older Liberal CBC watching boomers have lots of money. Their bills are paid. They're not worrying about where the next meal is coming from or where the next job is. Those older voters who voted Liberal sold out Canada, sold out the generations of Canada to come. It's really an outrageous betrayal to the rest of Canada. Next up, we got Wob Canoe saying he wants to build all these big projects that Mark Carney's against. Critical minerals, energy corridor, you know, all that stuff that goes against net zero.
What we've seen over the past few days, the possibility of a good working relationship between the federal government, the provinces and territories to serve you, all Canadians. I think we're heading in a good direction. The one I was raising on the call is a northern trade corridor. There's been so much talk about connecting resources in Western Canada to Tidewater and Hudson Bay. I think now's the time for us to go out into the market, the private sector, and see if that's something real, if that's something that the business community can make happen with financing. So here in Manitoba, we're working with the Indigenous nations, working on that conversation to see what the appetite is. Can we get products, whether it's ag, mining, energy products, to market in our northern port here in Manitoba, the Port of Churchill? But when we're talking about the call today, there was a strong focus on national unity. You had my counterparts from other parts of the country, myself included, extending that warm and hearty handshake, saying we're all in this thing together. And you had some voices saying like there's a challenge coming out of the federal election, some post-election sentiment. But I think, how do we work through those issues? It's by building big things together. And so if we
it's not going to happen, Wob.
are coming to the table and saying we've got a project to get Western resources to Tidewater that's also going to spur economic activity in the east and in the northern regions of Canada, to me, that's how we get people together and working towards a bright future in Canada. But if we roll up our sleeves and we say now's the time to build big things in
This guy's been hanging out with Trudeau way too much.
this country so that we can build up the Canadian economy, build up the Canadian worker.
Okay, we've had enough of Wob. Next up, we got Trump questioned about Chinese tariffs, the ports shutting down. This guy here saying, I represent the second largest container port in the U.S. I promise you it's a bad thing. Bad thing that the ports are shutting down in America right now.
Because business has slowed down, as you mentioned, we're seeing as a result, the ports here in the U.S., the traffic has really slowed, and now thousands of dock workers and truck drivers are worried about their jobs.
That means we lose less money, When I see that, that means we lose less money. Look, China was making over $1 trillion, 1.1 trillion, in my opinion. Different numbers from 500 billion to a trillion or $1 trillion. I think it was 1.1 trillion. And frankly, if we didn't do business, we would have been better off. Okay, you understand that. So when you say it slowed down, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. But we're going to make it so they can, I'd like to say they can do better, actually, in terms of the bottom line. We'd like to see China opened up so we can compete in China and, give people something that they've never had, access to something. That'd be great for the world. It would be great for our businesses. And I think it would be great for friendship.
Trump's keen on the friendship these days. First Carney, now China. Next up, we have Melanie Joly doing what she does best, looking like an absolute fool, talking about their trade relations with Donald Trump.
What was the idea of the team was to make sure first and foremost that Prime Minister Carney and President Trump could meet, that they could have a personal relationship that is important. Why? Because we know that President Trump is the sole decider of what's going on within the U.S. administration. And therefore, that relationship is key. It was shown not only in the public through a media conference, but also afterwards through a how would say, productive conversation that is established now. They know each other. They got to spend time together. Now, the next steps are definitely to see what can be done on the trade side and on the security side.
She said absolutely nothing there. Remember Melanie Joly, this bimbo ditz? In every graduating law school, someone had to come in dead last among the students. For this moment, how cute, flattering will get her everywhere. We've got this news here, which is terrible for Mark Carney. We've got Antarctica gains ice for the first time in decades, reversing trend of mass loss study finds. This is not good for his net zero agenda. The Antarctic sheet has gained mass between 2021 and 2023, a dramatic reversal from decades of loss. 4 key glacier basins in East Antarctica showed significant growth due to increased snowfall. The mass gain briefly contributed to a decrease in global sea level rise, according to satellite data. A surprising shift is underway at the bottom of the ocean. After decades of contributing to rising sea levels, Antarctica's massive ice sheet has started growing again, at least for now. The study goes on to say between 2011 and 2020, they're losing ice at a rate of 142 gigatons per year, and between 2021 and 2023, that trend reversed, with approximately 108 gigatons per year gaining that ice back. The growth is enough to temporarily offset sea levels rise by 0.3 millimeters per year. That does not work well for Mark Carney's fear-mongering for net zero. Next up, we got Mark Nixon posting this one. So another video here coming from the Bank of Canada talking about mortgages. This is painting a grim picture, and we knew this was coming because Justin Trudeau encouraged people to take out all those mortgages 4 or 5 years ago, and now those term limits are up. They're having to get a new mortgage, and prices are sky high, leading to people defaulting, being forced to sell their houses. The market's crashing now. Never trust a Liberal.
12 months, particularly in households without a mortgage. For example, the share of these households that are behind on credit card or auto loan payments has continued to go up. Among households with a mortgage, about 60% are facing renewal this year or next. Most of those renewing will see their payments rise because they took out their mortgage during the pandemic when rates were at historic lows. But the average increase in payment will be smaller than we expected a year ago. Still, if a large shock causes job losses, it'll be harder for some households to keep up with their debt payments. A prolonged trade war may be that shock. It would cause demand for Canadian exports to fall. It would disrupt supply chains, threatening jobs and incomes. Workers in trade-dependent industries could find it particularly difficult to continue managing their debt. A prolonged trade war would also matter for businesses. Most Canadian businesses have managed to adjust to past interest rate increases, and the surge in small business insolvencies last year proved to be temporary. But businesses in trade-related sectors, especially those with high debt, low profitability, or cash reserves, could also fall behind on debt payments. But if credit losses occur on a large enough scale, banks could cut back on lending in response. Struggling households and businesses would then have less access to credit to get through tough times. This cycle could exacerbate the economic downturn. In the non-bank financial sector, the growing presence of hedge funds in the market for Government of Canada bonds raises some concerns. Government bond markets are the foundation of the financial system, and they need to function smoothly for all other markets to work well. The increased activity by hedge funds has helped absorb increased issuance of government debt, keeping yields lower and liquidity higher. But hedge funds have also taken on increasingly large amounts of leverage to fund their purchase of government bonds. And this makes them more likely to pull back from these crucial markets in periods of stress, introducing added volatility. The recent gyrations in the U.S. Treasury market clearly illustrated this risk. If the trade war causes a larger spike in volatility than we've seen so far, leveraged hedge funds might rush to sell their holdings. That could strain liquidity across core markets, increasing stress throughout the financial system.
43% of the population voted for more of this. Apparently, Trump is scarier than economic doom in Canada.